Welcome to the Carnivore Cast, a podcast focused on the carnivore diet and lifestyle, with practical advice from successful carnivores, citizen scientists, and top researchers. I'm your host, Scott Myslinski, and I'm here to speak with experts and experienced carnivores to get answers to your biggest and meatiest questions while helping you live your best life as a carnivore. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. So I've got something a little bit different for you all today. I started this podcast to support a burgeoning community, which I am passionate about. I feel humbled to speak with role models, hear people's health stories, and help thousands on their health journeys. Along this journey, others have started businesses to improve our community. From time to time, you'll hear from select sponsors to the show. My hope is to help them grow and to share with you what I believe are products that will add tremendous value to you. These will be companies that I truly believe in their mission. I use the products myself, and I believe our community and you may find value from. First of these is the Carnivore Bar, a shelf-stable meat and fat bar that is delicious and portable. I'm salivating remembering the ones I've eaten. It comes in grass-fed and grass-finished or grain-finished, and also salted or unsalted, depending on your preference. Those are the only ingredients. Check out the Carnivore Bar and get yours at www.carnivorebar.com. Now on to the episode. Will Harris runs the legendary White Oak Pastures, the 1,000-acre Bluffton, Georgia farm his family has operated since 1866 for 5 generations. Under his leadership, the farm has returned to an environmentally sustainable and high animal welfare farming system. White Oak Pastures cooperates with nature to produce premium quality grass-finished beef, pasture-raised heritage pork and poultry that is healthy, safe, nutritious, and delicious. Welcome to the show, Will.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate having the opportunity to be here.
Yeah. Will, since 1866, 5 generations, that's incredible. Tell us a little bit about the history of the ranch, how it came to be, and what is White Oak Pastures in your words?
Sure. So my great-grandfather came here in 1866. He had had a farm about 50 miles from here, and he lost his farm in the Civil War. That's kind of a long story, but it's a pretty good story. But at any length, he did lose the farm. He was fortunate that he had an uncle who's a medical doctor here in Bluffton, Georgia. And the uncle started my great-grandfather over here in 1866. And we've been on this farm ever since. Today, the farm is a multi-species, multi-generational, vertically integrated family farm that we raise cows, hogs, sheep, goats, rabbits, 5 different poultry species, honey, eggs, organic vegetables, bunch of other stuff. What makes us a little unusual is we process everything here on the farm. So that's the vertical integration part.
Got it. And has it always been that way, or has that evolved over time?
It has not always been this way. It has evolved. The way we farm today would be, and have farmed for the last 20 years, would be, I suspect, remarkably similar to the way my great-grandfather and grandfather farmed. My father took over the farm post-World War II, and that is the generation that really changed agriculture incredibly. The changes would have been, we could talk about them all day, but industrialized, commoditized, and centralized the farm. And those changes were made for good reason. Europe was starving. a lot of the assets, war assets, could be redirected to the industrial farming. And it was done to make food cheap and abundant and safe. And it was wildly successful. It made food obscenely cheap and wastefully abundant and boringly consistent. But it had unintended consequences. It fell on the backs of the animals and the land and the rural community. About 25 years ago, I started changing the farm. And my daughters, after college, came home and have been with me for the last 10 or so years. And it's morphed back into something that I think is beautiful, that's very similar, again, to what my great-grandfather and grandfather did.
Yeah, that's amazing. And can you talk a little bit about what motivated those changes, 25 or so years ago, and what some of them were?
Sure. Well, first of all, I should say that it came about gradually. I didn't see a burning bush, or God didn't speak to me. I just it came about over a period of time. The first kind of the canary in the coal mine for me was animal welfare. I would have told you for most of the 20 years that I practiced industrial agriculture that my animal welfare was great. But over time, it seemed to me that it was not so great. Conventional animal welfare means that you keep the animal fed and watered and within a comfortable temperature range, and you don't intentionally inflict pain and suffering. And that's pretty good animal welfare. And that's what I did. But at a point, I started to realize that that's not good. That's not enough. In addition to those things, you really need to, it's really incumbent on the stockman to give the animal the environment in which it can express instinctive behavior. Cows were meant to roam and graze. Hogs were meant to root and wallow. Chickens were meant to scratch and peck. And in an industrial confinement model, those things they can't do it. And I think that's horrible animal welfare, but I used to think it was fine. So I started moving in that direction, ceased confinement feeding, ceased feeding unnaturals, foodstuffs, ceased using hormone implants and subtherapeutic antibiotics. And from there, I sort of fell in love with regenerative land management. And from there, I fell in love with the rebuilding of rural communities. So that's the evolution.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And Will, there's just a little bit of scratching. If you could just be careful you're not touching the microphone. A question about how those changes came about. You said they were tempered in over time. What came first, and what did you learn along the way? Because I believe you talked about on other podcasts, there wasn't a handbook for this stuff. So how did you know what changes to make? Were you just kind of trying to think intellectually about how nature behaves, or how did you do that?
Well, it's just very intuitive. And there's been a lot written in the last 10 or 15 years about kind of the how-to manuals. But when I started doing it, that did not exist. It's very intuitive. Once you accept the fact that nature is boss and figure out the natural cycles and systems, and you stop trying to make a complex ecosystem into a complicated factory, then it really comes very easy for you. You spend a lot of time sitting and looking and observing and just following intuitively. I think a lot about how would this all work before we industrialized it, before man got involved and turned this cyclical system into a linear system. And it's all about understanding the cycles of nature. They're very important. The carbon cycle, the energy cycle, the water cycle, the mineral cycle, the microbial cycle, the grazing cycle. All those cycles exist in nature. We humans became powerful through technology, so we broke those cycles, and that's when the degradation started, is the breaking of the cycles.
Yeah, and one thing that White Oak Pastures has become kind of famous for and is kind of blown up on social media and other forums is how you're sequestering the carbon. Is that something you've always known about, or has it just come to light recently with, attention on climate change and some of these studies being done?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting to me. There's one thing that you can absolutely depend on. 25 years ago, a young black-bearded Will Harris did not walk outside and say, I think I'm going to start sequestering carbon. That did not happen. What happened was I did figure out that the soil, I'm going to call it dirt. The dirt in my fields was a dead mineral medium, and the soil in the edge of the woods was a medium that was teeming with life. An organic medium. It was black and fluffy and absorbed water, and there's just things living in it. Some of them I could see, some of them I knew I couldn't see. And I said, I like that better than that. Not because of any atmospheric impact that I certainly had no way of knowing would occur, just because it was clearly I was in tune with nature enough to know that that's a better growing medium than the other. So I started, again, emulating nature. The difference in the field and the edge of the woods was in the fields, I used chemical fertilizer and pesticides and tillage. And in the woods, we didn't use those things. And there was more animal impact because there were creatures in the woods. So I started the biomimicry of I didn't use any more chemicals or chemical fertilizer, pesticides, tillage, and used animal impact, put animals on every acre, and later figured out about what was the proper rotation. And in doing that, my soil went from 0.5% organic matter. Listen to this now. It went from 0.5% organic matter 20, 25 years ago to over 5% organic matter today.
Wow.
And that's important for a lot of different reasons, but the most graphic reason is 1% organic matter on an acre of land will hold over 20,000 gallons of precipitation. So, and that's 1 inch of rain. So previously, my dirt would only absorb a 1/2 inch rain event. But today, my soil will absorb a 5-inch rain event. And I live in the Gulf Coast. My farm's in the Gulf Coast of Georgia, and we get 5-inch rain events. So we not only does that benefit me by making the land more drought resistant, but I'm helping people all the way down to and including the Gulf of Mexico because I don't have those horrible flood events where we wash toxic chemicals into the Gulf and have a big dead zone.
Yeah, that's amazing. And can you talk a little bit about the other results of the studies that have been done on White Oak Pastures and how it's affecting the environment?
Yeah, so let me tell you, for the people that don't know that might be listening, about what that study is. The study that we keep referring to, this was called an LCA, Life Cycle Assessment, LCA. And we sell some product, beef and pork and chicken and turkey, to Epic bars you might see in health food stores. And Epic was bought by General Mills, and General Mills offered to fund this $80,000 study to see if we were really doing what we said we were doing. And we were talking about regenerative and all that, but it was anecdotal. I mean, it was the truth, and I knew it was true, but I didn't have any evidence of it. It was all anecdotal, all just what I knew. So I agreed to allow them to fund the study. We both owned the data. And, the benefit would be that we could be made to look good if we were doing what we said. And the downside is we could really be embarrassed if it didn't come back that we were doing the things we said we were doing. And it was a real eye-opener. It came back with just compelling results, showing that White Oak Pastures is a carbon sink. We actually sequester more carbon than we put out. For the last 10 or so years, we've been told that cows are destroying the earth with their enteric emissions, flatulence and burping. And my cows do burp and flatulate. There's no doubt about that. But they offset more carbon in the soil than they put up. It's a carbon sink. In fact, we sequester 3.5 pounds of carbon dioxide equivalent for every pound of beef that we produce. So that's, I'm not the only, White Oak Pastures is not the only farm in the country that's doing that. Certainly not. We're the only ones that has third-party, scientifically proven study, peer-reviewed, that
Yeah, that's really interesting. And, it's obvious, but I didn't think of the fact that you didn't know what the results would actually say when you agreed to that study. How confident were you that, you were having a positive impact on the environment before that happened?
Well, I was really pretty sure that we were. I certainly couldn't quantify it, but I was pretty sure because I'd seen the difference in the soil. My soil is darker than it used to be. That color came from carbon that's pulled out. I anguished over the fact that I did not then, nor do I now, really understand the scientific process of the testing and analysis that went on. And, scientists make mistakes. I trust cows more than I trust chemists.
Yeah, what's amazing is you're innovating scientifically without even understanding the science, and the science is trying to catch up to you to understand how what you're doing is working so well.
That's a very kind way of putting it. I say that's an overly kind way of putting it. Here's the way I think you have to look at it as more factual. Is when my father started using chemical fertilizers and pesticides, it did exactly what the manufacturers said it would do. It increased his yield. But it had unintended consequences, and they were horrible. What we started doing was moving back to nature, and it had unintended consequences, and the unintended consequences were beautiful.
Yeah, that's amazing. And one thing you touched on, Will, that I want to go back to is this holistic livestock approach. It's not just about cattle, it's not just about beef, but it's all the animals kind of living in symbiosis. How does that work, and how does each animal help stimulate the land?
Oh, that is a great question. And it takes it's going to take some answering. So, you know the name John Muir?
Yeah, like the John Muir Trail.
Yeah, Muir Woods. He was a great naturalist, and he got a lot of great quotes, but one of them is something to the effect that in nature, when you pull a string, you see that everything is connected. And that's really beautiful. And the more you know about it, the more beautiful it gets. In nature, every creature, and that's plant, animal, microbe, from the lowest order to the highest order, has an impact. And that impact in some way benefits the system. We may not understand it, but it does benefit the system. And when we turned food production from that cyclical system to the very linear system that it is in industrial farming, we ignored that. And we started treating symptoms. You know, your insecticide, herbicide, fungicide. Side is just to kill. And in the modern farming system, every time a problem developed, we found a pesticide to kill it. And it treated the system. It was, in most cases, highly efficacious to make that symptom go away. But we did not understand the unintended consequences of what else it was doing. There's a crazy PhD researcher that I adore in Minnesota. His name is Jonathan Lundgren, and he does work on holistic systems. And he took a group of graduate students out and found a virgin, unbroken Minnesota prairie somewhere. And they dug down and took 1 cubic meter of the soil and took it and went through it painstakingly and analyzed every form of life that they found, every insect, every animal, every plant, microbe, and certainly they missed, there's some things they missed, some things they didn't know, but they identified every one they could. And then they put it through a computer model that showed how those living creatures affected each other. You know, this fungus is eaten by this bacteria that feeds minerals to this plant in return for the exudates or this sucrose the plant puts out in the root, on and on and on. And graphically drew lines, and he showed the graphic of those interconnections between all those living creatures, and it looked like 1,000,000 miles of fishing string. And the only thing you could understand from it is the complexity of all the interactions of all those living things. So when we humans said, the worst thing we did was plant these big monocultures of corn or soybeans or cotton or peanuts or wheat or rice, or big monocultures of pigs in confinement or chickens in confinement or cattle in feedlots. We ignored all that. We said, you know, when we use these products, these pesticides, we kill one symptom and expected the rest of it to keep on going without falter. And that was so wrong.
Yeah, that's interesting. And can you talk about, you know, what I think some of the non-beef animals are often neglected. So maybe you could just pick one or two and talk about the important roles that they play on the farm in particular, and why it's essential to have them.
Sure. So we manage our land. We got, you said 1,000 acres of land. That was sort of an old bio. We got 3,200 acres of land.
Oh, wow.
It's just small, but we manage it through animal impact. And the holistic management is the land manager, that would be me, decides what context he wants his land to be. And I want mine to be a grazing property. I have a neighbor who chooses to manage his as a hunting recreational property. I got another neighbor that manages his, a bunch of neighbors that manage theirs as industrial farming properties. But mine's a grazing property. So I use animal impact to achieve my context. And what that means is there are, hogs are really good at rooting and turning the soil in a manner that I guess only they can do it. And so I have pieces of land that need that. So that's where I put my hogs. I have land that needs the impact that comes from poultry. That would be a lot of manure, a lot of phosphate, a lot of nitrogen, lighter soil disturbance, still some soil disturbance, but much lighter. And we use poultry there. We have land that has where the grass is really growing thick and fast, and grass can get too big, too thick, and it needs grazing. So we use cattle in that instance. We have land that has other species, woody species, which is the goats, or forbs, which is the sheep. I've kind of oversimplified that a little bit, but you see what I'm saying. Is that
yeah.
And then there's symbiosis within the animals. Goats and hogs are both forest creatures, and they are this is not very appetizing, but the fact is that hogs eat goat manure. Mm. So when a goat defecates and the hogs eat the manure, they break, the hogs are breaking the life cycle of the barber pole worms. That's an intestinal parasite that affects goats. So you can clean the parasites out of your goats by having hogs present. And by the way, the hog manure contains, goats will eat plants that hogs don't eat. So when the hogs eat the goat manure, they get the nutrients from those plants they wouldn't eat on their own. So everybody wins. That's what symbiosis is. Everybody wins. Everybody benefits.
Yeah, so interesting, all these interactions and how you've learned to manage that over time.
And you don't get that in a monoculture. In a monoculture, which is the way we farm industrially, factory farm model, there is no symbiosis because you manage for one species. Corn in the cornfield, cotton in the cotton field, pigs in the pig house, chickens in the chicken house. So you give up symbiosis.
Right. And can you talk a bit, Will, about the economics of regenerative versus conventional feedlot? You touched on it a little bit, talking about the industrialized model versus, maximizing animal welfare. But what are the differences in the economics, and maybe how can we make that closer over time?
So first, let's acknowledge that either model can be profitable, or either model could fail in a dismal manner. Either one, the industrial model or the holistic model. There's a reason that not many people are farming holistically, and 8% of the people are farming industrially. And the reason is the risk to reward ratio is advantageous in the industrial model. How profitable you are or not has more to do with how well you manage than anything else. We could talk about that for a long time. But the fact is the risk to reward ratio is more advantageous in the industrial model. In the way we farm, we're working without a safety net. We raise animals and slaughter them on the farm. If I had one E. coli recall, that would wind up my farming operation. I can't insure against that.
Wow.
In farming, you've got, among other things, federally subsidized crop insurance that prevents that kind of dismal economic circumstance.
And how about like the ability to scale and get your product to a certain price? You know, a lot of people will complain, you know, just looking at the price tag of the cost of a grass finished product, you know, a high animal welfare regenerative product versus, you know, the ground beef they get in a Walmart or a conventional grocery store.
Well, and sadly, that's the way it is. It will cost more. When for the last 80 years, reductive scientists have looked for ways to lower the cost of production of commodities. And they've come up with an arsenal of tools to lower the cost of production. We just named them: chemical fertilizers, pesticides, hormone implants, subtherapeutic antibiotics. This goes on and on. So when a consumer asks a farmer to produce his food without using the tools that take cost out of production, what happens? Cost is added back to production. So sadly, it costs more. And there's another component of it, is farming the way we farm is not highly scalable. It is highly replicatable, but not highly scalable. For instance, our farm, White Oak Pastures, is the largest private employer in our county. 150-something employees. We sell about $20 million worth of products a year. And I don't know that we can get much bigger. I don't think that the economies of scale would be there for us to go to $40 billion and 300 employees. It doesn't work like that. It's cyclical, not linear. But there could be a White Oak Pastures or 2 or 3 in every ag county in the United States of America, and it should be. Now, conversely, in a linear system, if you're building cars and you need twice as many cars, you put on another line in your plant, and there are economies of scale that come from doing that. So there's a reason why 90-something% of the food in this country is raised the way it is, and the only way it's going to change will be if enough consumers demand that it be changed. And I don't know if it'll happen or not. I think that we Americans are hopelessly addicted to obscenely cheap food. And we found enough people to buy $20 million worth of stuff from us. So our program works. The margins are tight. We don't make a tremendous amount of money, but we're the largest employer in the county, and the county that really needs it, and our employees make way more than the county average. So it's how many times that can be done will depend on the consumer.
Yeah, that's really commendable. And Will, you've been at this for a while. I'm curious, where have you been tempted or offered or approached to take shortcuts in your process in your farm, and why have you not done that?
Well, see, the biggest obstacle for the success of White Oak Pastures and the other farms like White Oak Pastures. And by the way, let me say this. I keep talking about White Oak Pastures because it's what I know about. We're certainly not the only farm in the country that's doing this. You've got, Greg Gunthorpe in Indiana. You got Spencer Smith in Nevada. You got Trent Hendricks in Missouri. You got Blake Alexandre in California. There's people. I wish I could say there's thousands or hundreds. It's probably more like dozens, but we're not the only people that are doing it. But we that group I've said, and some others are doing it. And the greatest obstacle that we have to success is big multinational companies, food companies, greenwashing their product. You know what I mean by greenwashing?
I think I do, but why don't you explain?
To me, greenwashing is putting out industrial or near industrial products, but skillfully describing it in such a way that people are tricked and think it's what we do.
Yeah, isn't grass-fed, isn't that just a completely unregulated term that anyone can kind of slap on their product?
There aren't, yes, I mean, to a great extent, and there aren't many terms that are really effectively regulated. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But to answer your first question is the only big multinational food companies spend God only knows what, probably millions and millions of dollars greenwashing their product, but that devalues what we do, makes it harder for us to extract the margins we need out of our products. And the only weapon we've got against greenwashing is authenticity. And so if we start to down a slippery slope, we lose the only weapon we got. The way we operate today, we can tell people and do tell people, come and look. We built 6 cabins on this farm for people to come spend the night. We got a store here on the farm that's open 15, 16 hours a day. We got a restaurant that cooks 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. And if you come, we'll show you everything we do. We'll show you the slaughterhouse. We'll show you, you can go in any building we got, anywhere you want to go, ask any question you want to. And that's authenticity. And it's a powerful weapon against greenwashing. It's the only weapon against greenwashing. It's just hard to get it to people. Yeah,
that's really powerful. Some people say integrity is the hardest thing to build and the easiest thing to lose, and one of the few things that's always within your control. And Will, what you mentioned some other ranchers in your area who choose slightly different methods. What have other ranchers learned from you or contacted you about, either locally or throughout the country?
Well, we learn from each other. I mean, it's a very open community, and there's nothing that any farmer can call and ask me or email and ask me that I won't give my best information in response. And I've never been turned down by a farmer to share with me what I needed to know. So I think that it's a very open community.
That's great. And have others tried to replicate some of your practices from White Oak? And have you consulted with other ranchers about that?
I'd like to think they have, because I've certainly replicated theirs. I'm not a consultant. I don't charge and go visit farms. I got friends that do. If you want that kind of service, there's a guy named Gabe Brown in North Dakota that's probably the best in the business. And there's some others, but Gabe is in the consulting business, and he's very, very, very good. And he's been to my farm 4 or 5 times, and I've been to his one time. I'm personally just not in the consulting business. If you come see me, I'll show you anything you want to see. But I just got all I can do here on this farm. We do have an intern program. I forgot that. You can look at our website, whiteoakpastures.com, and there's a section in there for an intern program that we have that I'm proud of, and we've got we take 4 or 5 per quarter, 4 quarters a year, and I think I like to believe we've taught some good people a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal opportunity for young folks to really explore and learn from you and your mentorship approach. And what you mentioned consumers and moving away from a cheap attitude towards food. What can the consumer do to help out farmers like you? ranchers like you? What can they do to support this type of agriculture?
The only thing they can do for us is the only thing we need anybody to do for us, and that's buy our product. You know, there was a time that I thought that certifications were going to really be the answer to people knowing what to buy, where to buy it, how much to pay for it, what it meant. But I've lost that confidence. The certification in general, and there's some good certifications out there, but generally it's been bastardized today. And the reason is not that they're not some great certifiers out there with a lot of integrity. There are, but there's a certification for every shade of gray from smut black to snow white. So it's no longer a situation where you try to strive to meet the requirements of the certification. Today, you just pick the one that fits what you do. And there's some very low-hanging fruit. And there's so many of them that the consumer is hopelessly confused. And farmers are too. So I'm not a fan of certifications anymore. I used to be. I thought maybe regulation, governmental regulation might come in, but as you pointed out, all of the terms have been prostituted. You can say anything you want to about your product. It's fine. You can slaughter cattle in New Zealand or Brazil or Uruguay and raise them and slaughter them over there, bring the beef over here and call it product of the USA. That's how bad that is.
Wow.
So, and I've written a lot about that if you check on our website or our blog. There's only one way the consumer cannot get tricked, and that's they got to know who their farmer is. And that's a lot of work on the consumer, and most of them aren't going to do it. And in a perfect world, you go to the farm and look, but that's not practical. So what you got to do is you got to go on the website and social media and see what they say they're doing and how transparent they are. If you know that farmer and all those I mentioned they invite you to come look at what they're doing anytime you want to. Show up unannounced. It's not a good idea to wake me up in the middle of the night, but anything short of that, you can just show up and say, I want to see your whatever, and we'll show it to you. That kind of transparency and authenticity should give the consumer all he needs to know about who to buy from. And the only way that farmer is going to be able to continue to do that is if he finds enough people to buy from him to make his business work.
Yeah, I love how White Oak Pastures not only provides this phenomenal product, but you also create experiences and really invite people in to see the operations both virtually and physically. I think that's really fantastic. And I think one of the things that's attracted a lot of people to your ranch. Will, I have to ask you, I don't mean to raise your blood pressure, but I wanted to ask what your thoughts are on the plant-based Impossible Burger and these other meats and their claims about sustainability.
No, that's not going to raise my blood pressure. I absolutely respect the right of any consumer to eat what they want to eat. If a consumer, we have vegetarians and vegans here all the time. In fact, we're probably a lot of them, because a lot of them are curious about the animal production system. And if someone tells me that they don't eat meat because they can't stand the idea of eating an animal that has lived, I respect that, no problem. If someone tells me that they just don't like the way it feels in the mouth, the taste is not good, I respect it. If they tell me It makes them feel so they're not good. They believe it's not good for their health. That's fine, no problem. It's a lifestyle choice. Everybody gets to pick. Now, and I want those people to have other choices. I don't want to just live on bananas. Let them. They need some protein. Plant-based protein is fine. When my blood pressure does get up, is when these manufacturers of vegetable-based protein tell lies, like Dr. Pat Brown of Impossible Burger, and say that his product is more beneficial to the environment than the way we raise our livestock here. That is simply a lie, and that angers me. That is not okay. I won't let that happen. You can say that it's the vegetable-based protein is better for the environment than industrially produced meat, and I'm not going to argue that. That's between those two factions. But I'm in a separate industry, and neither one of them have the environmental benefit of what I do. And again, we got a scientific study, peer-reviewed, that proves it. The people that did our LCA is a very professional environmental engineering firm from Minneapolis, Minnesota, called Qantas, Quantis. And ironically, Qantas did an LCA on Impossible Burger. And this is, you can't make this up. This is just so. Impossible Burger has a carbon footprint of 3.5 pounds per pound of Impossible Burger they produce. We have a negative carbon footprint of 3.5 pounds of carbon dioxide equivalent for every pound of beef we produce. So if you want to break even with your carbon footprint, for every Impossible Burger you eat, you got to eat one of mine to break even.
Yeah, you're covering their butts.
I'm covering their butts, and that's okay. But when if you go on the Impossible Burger website, and there's other things that Dr. Brown has written, he goes on and on about how it literally calls out regenerative agriculture, not just cattle production. He calls out regenerative, and that's not okay. I'm not going to quietly take that.
Yeah. I'd rather eat double the burgers from you, Will, and make up for the vegans and people buying his story. Well, it's clear that you take a lot of pride in White Oak, Will, and rightly so. I'm curious what you hope the future of White Oak Pastures is, 20 years from now, 40 years from now, and what you're looking forward to.
Well, no family business persists in perpetuity. It just doesn't work like that. They all come to an end at some point. I am the fourth generation, and I'm 65 years old. My daughters and their spouses are deeply involved. They're the fifth generation. They are just in their early 30s. So this farm almost certainly will go on for 30 more years if we find enough people to buy our product. And then between the two of them, they've got three babies in the sixth generation. So, this farm will, assuming that the economics doesn't fail us, will go through the fifth generation, and there is a sixth generation that it might go through. And while I know that the farm will not persist forever, I want to be sure it doesn't break down on my watch.
Yeah, that's all you can do. And I've had the chance to speak with your daughter, Jenny, and she's fantastic. And, I see many bright things ahead for the farm and hope that enough consumers can help boost you up and support White Oak as it continues to lead the charge around practices like regenerative and holistic livestock.
My daughters are forces of nature, and they married very well. So I'm not worried about them. But you can't run it from the grave. If you have I think anyone that operates a family business would probably tell you that the goal is to give your children the opportunity to come back, but not the obligation to come back.
I like that. Well, definitely really appreciate you taking the time today, Will, to chat with me. For folks who are interested, I'll have the link to everything in the show notes. But definitely go to White Oak Pastures, buy some quality animal products. Buy something besides beef, be adventurous, get outside the conventional, what you eat every day, and help support this holistic livestock approach. I'd really encourage you to do that. They have some fantastic other animals like turkey and chickens, and lamb, and some of the other ones that Will mentioned here today. But thanks again for your time today, Will. I really appreciate it.
Again, you can order that stuff from our website, which is whiteoakpastures.com, and FedEx will bring it to your house. Perfect.
Don't even have to go outside and get the new coronavirus.
Right. And then all products are coronavirus free.
That's great. That's the label you should smack right on every single package you ship.
I'm sure it's on something at the grocery store right this minute.
Anyway, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, Will, and thanks for taking the time for me.
Thank you for including me on your call.
Of course. Bye now. Will Harris is an ally in the beef industry. He promotes ruminant agriculture that restores not only your health, but also the health of the planet. At the Carnivore Bar, they believe that matters and source their 100% grass-fed, grass-finished beef from Joyce Farms, a U.S.-based ranch that's non-GMO, no antibiotics, and no pesticides. As forage agronomist Peter Ballerstedt will tell you, virtually any animal agriculture is better for the planet than huge monocropping. That's why they offer both grass-fed and grain-fed varieties at the bar to meet people where they are and not to be dogmatic. But their true passion is for regenerative raised beef, because at the Carnivore Bar, they believe you can make a difference with your food choices, and that's why they wanted to support this show with Will Harris, a visionary leader in the grass-fed ranching world who's making the world a more sustainable place for us all. Check out the Carnivore Bar and get yours at www.carnivorebar.com. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the Carnivore Cast on Patreon. By becoming a patron, you'll help us reach more people and continue to create content on Carnivore. There are also exclusive perks available, such as private Q&As, consultations with me, and more. Become a supporter at patreon.com/carnivorecast. Check the episode description for the link. Thank you, and I'll see you there. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Carnivore Cast. If you enjoyed this episode, please review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And share it with a friend. What questions would you like answered, or who would you like to hear from in the carnivore research community? You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at CarnivoreCast, or go to carnivorecast.com. You can also email me at info@carnivorecast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep it carnivore.